Whereas the fundamentals of leadership really haven't changed all that much in the last, I don't know, 50, 100 years. The context within which we practice them has changed a lot. If in the year 2000, I guess when you guys were like in the 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, you'd lay down and taken a long nap, say for 10 years. When you woke up in 2010, you simply couldn't connect the dots and rationalize the difference between the world you went to sleep in and the one you woke up in. You couldn't do it. Think about all the stuff that happened in that period. Politically, we changed. Scientifically, we changed. Militarily, business changed. The workplace changed considerably too. I mean, think about it. We've pretty well stripped out things like loyalty and job security over the course of that period, which dramatically changes what happens when people show up for work. British management scholar Charles Handy said that corporations ought to stop looking at themselves as employers and instead see themselves as what he calls organizers of work. Think about that for a second. Not employers, organizers of work. So we lose, all the connotations that have existed for so long about what, the employment relationship is supposed to be. And, I think he's spot on, frankly, because we have entered a very new and different world in the workplace. A world where organizations that are doing things right with respect to leadership are growing faster, they're more competitive, and they're out earning all their counterparts. This is something that we've studied over the last 15 years, and recently took a look, at one more group of companies that we call the contented cows that over the last 10 years, have done exactly that. They've outgrown, they've out-earned their competitors by a wide margin. Companies like Google and Disney, and they're just knocking the cover off the ball. Let me give you 2 examples of leaders that I think, have really stepped out and are making a big difference. One is Tony Hsieh, who runs Zappos. If you don't know who Zappos is, you've been hiding in a cave somewhere, because these guys are growing. They do a wonderful job in the retail space. Just ask my wife. She's got to be in their top 100 customers. Anyhow, Hsieh's background is in IT, and I think perhaps because of some earlier experiences when he was working for other people, other companies, he decided that when he got his chance, he wanted to run things a little bit differently. And he's certainly done that. And think about it, their business is about as sexy as running a coal mine. They've got a call center and a bunch of big warehouses. But, run it, they do. And it's based on a very strong values-based approach to doing business. You take a tour through their office and you see the values, not just hanging on the walls, but in play everywhere. They're present in their recruiting. If they don't care how much talent you have. If you don't fit their values, you're not going to go to work for Zappos. And oh, by the way, if you do happen to come to work there, and it turns out you don't share the values, they will eject you like a virus. But it's not all values-based. He also believes that work and fun are not mutually exclusive. And I'll probably get disinvited from ever coming back there for telling this story, but it's true. I was there when we were working on this book, and we were on the 2nd floor of their office, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you can hear all this racket, people playing kazoos and beating on drums. And I looked, and there we have 3 or 4 of their employees rolling this cart down the aisle. They were celebrating Zappos customers that day. And they're passing out little cakes and Jell-O shots in their office in the middle of the afternoon. Real Jell-O shots. I know, I tried them. I can imagine trying to convince some of my HR buddies that this would be a good thing to do. Let me give you another one that we found. There's a gentleman by the name of Alejandro Bustamante who runs a maquiladora outside of Tijuana, Mexico. He runs a company called Plamex, which is the manufacturing arm of Plantronics, the folks that make the communications gear. Earpieces, headphones, good stuff too, by the way. It's got about 2,000 or 3,000 people working for him. The average age is probably close to what it is for the students in this class. And my partner went down and spent a day and a half with him. And one of the things that Alejandro impressed upon him was the fact that he tries to make a real difference in his leadership by treating people with respect. In a few big ways, but small ways too. One of the things he does is whenever someone's hired to work with Plamex, no matter what the position is, he sets them up with business cards. And you might think, well, hey, so what? You know, business cards, that's $8, $10. Try taking those things away from these guys. They love them. They feel it's a measure of respect for them. Now, he's not all about, you know, straight, serious stuff either. In fact, something that we found out when we were down there is that, again, just think about this, 2,000, 3,000 people, you know, about your age. I mean, you fall in love, you want to get married, do that sort of thing. Well, it turns out that Mexico the Mexican law said in order to get married, you had to go to your town of birth and get a marriage license. And because some of these folks were born in the center of the country, they had to take off for a week or two to go home, get the license, come back and get married. And he said, this is crazy. So he petitioned the Mexican government and said, look, this is, you know, the 21st century, let's try to act that way. And unlike some other governments, they actually listened and they did something about it. So they changed the requirement. So then, you know, Alejandro wasn't done yet. He went to his workforce and said, you know what? Weddings cost a lot of money. I know it's a hardship for you, so tell you what we can do if you want. We've got a wonderful facility here. We've got a great, gorgeous cafeteria. If you want to have weddings in it, you can do it. Well, what they wound up doing was setting up actually a group wedding, which they now do once a year around Valentine's Day. And however many of their employees that have, you know, chosen to get married and want to do it, I mean, they go in together and spring for the flowers and the food and what have you and have a great time. And I understand that it's a manufacturing plant, so Alejandro has also worked out a deal with a local justice of the peace who's charging them a group rate for doing it. But if you take a look at this picture here, look at the looks on some of the guys in the picture. Some of them look like they're still wondering if maybe they can get out of this. Let's just take a second to talk about honesty, because I think it ties in very much to a big, hairy problem that we have, not just in the workspace, but in life in general, and that's trust. And I suspect most of us have attended a Cirque du Soleil show. If you haven't, go do it. It's worth the money. I mean, there is absolute magic that happens underneath those big yellow bright tents. And these performers just leave it in the arena every night. Now, imagine you're one of the performers that is you know, an aerialist. And during the course of your event, your act, you're swinging from this trapeze high above the arena. You got to let go, and somebody on the other side is going to catch you. Now imagine how that would go if you had the slightest bit of concern that that person didn't have your best interests at heart. My bet is that you'd be going a lot lower and slower if you left the trapeze at all. My point is that integrity, that truth, boiling down to trust, is a central lubricant in life. It allows us to go faster. Because what happens if you're concerned, if you're afraid that you might get hurt or screwed? You slow down, don't you? You slow down a lot so that you can protect yourself and take care of you. So to the degree that we don't have the level of truth and trust in the workspace that we could, we're slowing the business down. You know, at a concept level, being truthful is about as simple as dirt, isn't it? I mean, you know the difference between truth and untruth or dishonesty. But then we introduce the human element. You start putting pressure on it because we want to be popular. We want people to like us. You know, we want shareholders, if you're in a public company, to be happy because you meet or beat your earnings targets every quarter. You know, and if you're married, you want to stay married. And you're shaking your head and wondering about that last one, aren't you? Well, I don't think there's a married man alive who hasn't cowed in fear of the question, honey, do you think this new dress makes me look fat? Now, I know you're going to just tell them the gosh honest truth, aren't you? Yeah, sure you are. What happens is that you start with something that's conceptually simple, and then we start nibbling around the edges, you know, with a little, you know, varnish here, a little lipstick on the pig there, and the next thing you know, we have completely lost sight of the truth. There are three downsides that I can see that are associated with failing to be truthful. The first is a human cost. I can think of a situation that I was personally involved in. We were called in to work in a very large company. Let's just call it Giant. And it seems that during the course of a 12-month period at Giant, they had fired 987 employees. Now, that's a lot of people. I mean, it's a big company, but that's still a lot of people. And they were fired not for lying, cheating, stealing, those kinds of things, but ostensibly for doing a bad job. And they asked us to take a look at it and see what perhaps could be learned. And so we went out and interviewed some of the managers who had pretty high rates of termination to see what they had to say. We spent some time talking with some of the people who'd been fired. I mean, that was fun. And also dug into their HR information system to see what we could learn there. And one of the things that we found was that at Giant, they had a policy which said that every 6 months, as long as you're there, you're going to have a written, formal performance review. So we took a look at that. And how many of these 987 people do you think in the 6 months preceding their termination had a review which says you're doing a crummy job? 3. Not 3%, three people. The other 984 had either gotten no review whatsoever or more often had gotten a review which says you're doing just fine. And oh, by the way, 2/3 of them also had gotten a merit increase in the 6 months preceding their termination. So here it is. Out of my mouth, you're doing okay. In writing, you're doing okay. Here, have some more money. You're fired. Terrible human cost. I mean, how many of those folks really shouldn't have been fired at all? And maybe had they had the chance to be told that you're not doing as well as you think you are, they'd have improved. There's also a direct financial cost associated with failure to tell the truth and have high levels of integrity in the workspace. In fact, there's been a number of very well-respected engagement studies which suggest that the lack of engagement on the part of workers when they come to work is responsible for something in the order of $380 billion US annually in lost productivity. That's about 2.5% of our $15 trillion economy. If we could recapture even half of that, you're looking at 1% growth in GDP. You add that to the 1% that we're losing due to the sequester, and then all of a sudden this 2.5% growth economy we have becomes 4.5%, at which point you and your parents stop worrying so much about your next job, or for that matter, paying tuition. I mean, it's a huge potential impact. Okay. Third, we have a respect deficit, which basically means that anybody with any brains or ability doesn't want to go to work for you. if they can't trust you.